scholars of evolution adapt to make the most of their environment. Here, 700 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, there are countless examples of how living things have adapted to thrive in their surroundings. There's the polar bear's white coat of camouflage, the ptarmigan's heavily feathered feet, which keep it from sinking into soft ground or snow, as do the large lateral hooves of the caribou. The muskox, with his dense protective covering, has also adapted to his environment. 325 species of flowering plants adapt as well. Their simple physical structure helped them draw every possible advantage from the short month of sunshine in the north. Now, for the first time, there is a story to be told of life adapting beneath the Arctic tundra. This is Nanisivik, a word that means a place where people find things. Here, in one of the last frontier regions of the world, there are 7 million tons of lead and zinc ore. But there is also permafrost 600 meters deep, possibly the deepest in the world. That means that many conventional methods of mining won't work here. The dust created by drilling, for example, can't be controlled, as in every other mine, by water. Water would freeze. A new mechanical dust collector had to be created, making this the world's first underground metal mine to successfully work with dry drilling. It may also be the most efficient of all underground mines. It takes just 30 men to mine, crush, and move 2,000 tons of ore to the mill each day. The room and pillar system of excavation means 90% of the ore body can be extracted. After it's mined, the ore is broken up into chunks the size of large apples by this jaw crusher. It can handle 300 tons of ore an hour. There's a further crushing stage, and then a journey on a conveyor system that's more than 1 kilometer in length. Destination? The grinding mills, which grind the ore into particles the size of sand from a beach. In the flotation process which follows, the fine ore is bathed in chemicals which draw the lead and zinc to the surface, separating it from the waste. 90% of the lead and 95% of the zinc is recovered. The operation is monitored by laboratory analysis of samples taken every 2 hours to determine how much lead and zinc, as well as silver, cadmium, and iron, the ore contains. The laboratory must meet rigid levels of precision. It has all the equipment it needs to achieve these levels. When the mineral concentrates have been separated from the waste rock, water must be removed from the mix. It's thickened, vacuum filtered, then dried to a final concentrate that's 4 to 5% moisture. That's a critical range. Any drier, and some of the minerals will be lost as dust. With any more moisture, they'd freeze. Nanisivik is at Strathcona Sound on Baffin Island, a sleeping Arctic mass 3,200 kilometers due north from Montreal or Toronto. When you compare it in size to West Germany and the Netherlands, the final destination of the concentrates, Baffin Island is more than twice as large as both of these countries combined. Our story begins 30 kilometers from Nanisivik at Arctic Bay, named after the Canadian Coast Guard vessel Arctic, which arrived here in 1910. On this voyage, the Arctic's captain, J.E. Bernier, claimed Canadian sovereignty over the entire northern archipelago.
I took possession of Baffin Island for Canada in the presence of several Eskimos. And after firing 19 shots, I instructed an Eskimo to fire the 20th, telling him that he was now a Canadian.
Today, a different attitude prevails in relationship with the Eskimo, or Inuit, as they're called in their own language. In the mid-1950s, the Canadian government invited the inhabitants of several hunting villages to take advantage of the school and medical services in the new community of Arctic Bay. The Inuit, who once had to barter with their cousins south of the tree line for wood for their paddles and masts, who once used their distinctive red-streaked soapstone for sculpting blubber lamps, now market their crafts throughout North America and parts of Europe. But in recent years, some have chosen more modern forms of employment which allows them to make use of the education and trade skills that all young Inuit are now receiving. This is the neighboring community of Nanisivik as it looked under construction in 1975. In addition to the technical problems that had to be resolved at Nanisivik, there were social concerns to consider. What impact would this project have on native peoples? To find out, discussions and meetings were held with residents of Arctic Bay and other communities of northern Baffin Island, to the mutual benefit of both Inuit and Kabluna, as the white man is called in this region. The brightly painted houses, which might seem gaudy on the suburban avenues of the south, are a calculated attempt to add contrast to the long and essentially colorless winter. Some Kabluna visiting Nanisivik for the first time are surprised to learn how readily the Inuit can adapt his skills to the white man's crafts. In a very short time, many have become competent mechanics, carpenters, welders, plumbers, and electricians. And since construction work proceeded through the bone-chilling winter of 1974 and 75, there were times when the Inuit found that his birthplace gave him a distinct advantage over the new arrivals. But working at Nanisivik isn't all work. In 1974, the Canadian government report on criteria for northern living stressed that man's need for common meeting places are uncommonly important in the north. The dome is appropriately designed like a giant igloo. It's now used for movies and dances, which bring the residents of both communities together. But while Nanisivik was under construction, it served as a convenient cafeteria, accommodating up to 350 hungry workers. As this film was being made, a gymnasium and swimming pool were being built. Ample recreational facilities are important in the north to alleviate boredom, disorientation, and aggression that sometimes create problems in isolated communities, especially in isolated communities where one winter night can be 4 months long.
Roger, John, requesting Resolute Bay weather, please.
Resolute Bay, actual weather, 1,500 scattered, 12,000 scattered.
The introduction of satellite telephone service created a more reliable and psychologically important bridge to the outside world. A world which at one time could be reached only via radio or a long and tiring ride in small aircraft.
Clean up this mess, or you're just going to sit there? Okay. I'll help you,
But even in its early days, when television fare was limited to weeks-old videotapes flown in from Edmonton, Inuit and Kabluna worked and relaxed together in a spirit of friendship and respect.
Hey, Pop, would you leave Aunt Esther alone? It would be a pleasure.
Goodwill is essential in a land that is virtually a desert. Not as much snow as many expect. But when it does fall, working or even walking becomes a difficult chore.
Getting so hard to remember what you meant when you said love is all you need.
Creating both a mine and a community requires an enormous degree of coordination. But when the locale is a 5,000-kilometer sea voyage from the source of supplies, good planning is often all that stands between failure and success. A good deal would depend on the annual sea lift, which must be completed between early August and the end of September, before the winter ice sets in. Anything of substance bound for Nanisivik must be on the Montreal docks by mid-July. And for some voyages, even a September arrival in Nanisivik may require an icebreaker escort. Planning for the sea lift begins in January. It was part of the job for the project's two construction managers. This is Jim Marshall. He and Roy James alternated between a month on the site and a month with the other planners in Toronto. Since completion of the project, Jim has moved to the site as the mine manager and has brought his family with him. Construction of the concentrator plant began in the summer of '75, following the arrival of a shipload of cement from the south, mixed with local stone crushed at the site. As you might expect when you're working this far from the nearest yellow pages, you need as many skills as possible close at hand. Self-sufficiency in electrical power is also critical. This plant, with its capacity of 6,000 kilowatts, is the largest producer of electricity in the high Arctic. In yet another Nanisivik first, waste heat from the power plant is used to dry the mineral concentrate and to help warm the interior of the coldest mine on Earth, thus getting the maximum possible benefit from the special Arctic diesel fuel that has cost so much to bring so far. The climate was one reason it made sense to house the concentrator, power plant, warehouse, offices, and maintenance facilities under one roof. One of the more remarkable feats of engineering in the north is the Nanisivik dock. The construction techniques developed here have since been studied by engineers from Japan and the Soviet Union. Nature helped by providing a winter working platform of ice 2 meters thick. Without the ice, work barges and platforms would have been needed from the south, a long, expensive